Hello everyone and welcome to the stream. So happy to see you all. Sorry my time has been way off today. I started late. I got distracted during my intro, starting soon screen. I'm just a hot mess today, but I thank you all for coming. Hello Turkey Fluffs. Hello Saki, my priest. Hello the cutest little dragon Keelie. Hello Master Fail. Hello Michael. I hope you have good luck in your Pokemon, but I appreciate you coming by to say hi. Hello Alistair Nia, and hello Solfang. Yes, it has been a while, Solfang. I hope you've been doing well. I hope everybody enjoyed their Friday. My Friday was pretty quiet. I mostly fluked about, and Small Wolf reappeared in the Citadel, which is always amazing. Happy to see them back here. And safe from their travels. I went and engaged in a long walk adventure to go find my bank to deposit some checks. And then that was pretty much my day. I also started watching Genius Prince, the anime, and it makes me laugh in part because it's like if you're familiar with Warhammer 40k novels. It's kind of like if Caiaphas Cain was made the Prince of a Kingdom. Hello, Space. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Eris. I have been good, Solfang. Things have been picking up very well for me in my personal life, so I'm very happy with that. Sure, Space, what is your new line for the night? But yeah, I hope everybody is having a great start to their weekend. In Obsidian news, yesterday I went to the courthouse and I filed to get my name changed, which was a huge step forward for me, so I'm really excited about that. So in a couple weeks I should get the court order that my name has been changed. At that point, I can file with California to get my birth certificate amended to have my name and proper gender on it. So everything's coming up Obsidia. So yeah, I'm really excited about all of that. You will definitely be invited to my wedding. Would you like to know why? I love it, Space. I love it. It's so silly. This is gonna be a daring wedding, Space, as we are finally wed. Yeah, so that was really great news. Got like 2 to 3 more weeks till my second surgery consultation. I bought some silicone gel boob inserts to get a feel for what it's like to have a heftier bosom walking around. Because it can't happen without the bride. But Space, you're also a bride. It could happen with either of us or both of us. We shall know Obsidia as Madam Touch the Butt the Second. But yeah, so I've been walking around with the silicone inserts and stuff, and it's interesting. It's also like my first bra that has like an underwire in it, and it's pretty uncomfortable, I'm not gonna lie. The inserts are fine, the weight is actually not the issue, it's just how uncomfortable the bra feels. Hey Cygnus, welcome, welcome. But yeah, so that's been fun. That's literally been me. I got mad at Total War Warhammer 3. I like cannot figure out for the life of me how to properly play ogres, and that's pissing me off because I was doing an ogre campaign. So I kind of put it down for a while. I might jump back to Fire Emblem Three Houses to get some fulfilling strategy game time in. But I have hiccups now. But yeah, that's been me. You know, a simple Cydia, they call me. I heard wires are a pain, but I'm a guy, so I have no clue. Yeah. Yeah, wires, it's weird. I think I just bought like an incredibly uncomfortable bra, because I bought a mastectomy bra, because I was hoping that it's like, oh, I bought these inserts, I'll put them in, except my inserts that I bought are designed to just be in a normal bra. You don't need to put them into a mastectomy bra, so it's like the most uncomfortable of both worlds. It's Dame, actually, Michael. It is Dame Akami. Dame is actually the female title equivalent of Sir. It just doesn't get used very often. Like, you would pretty much only hear it for, like, British actors and actresses. Like, Dame Judi Dench is an example of Dame in action. Yeah, one hell of a day. But yeah, so that's been me. That's been me living that city of life. Bakavita. What else do I got going on? Still planning what we're gonna be doing next week for games. I'm not sure. Probably gonna try Darkest Dungeon again. Hopefully I feel less shitty this time around. What else was there? And then of course Fallout New Vegas. I haven't decided what the third stream is gonna be. I might bring back an indie game like Wildermouth or something. Dame Obsidia. I'm technically a lady, which is above Dame. It's comparable to Lord. But, you know, Obsidia's a hell of a dame. What can I say? Grandma's flirting again. Hey, Grandma can flirt with me any day. Yep. You're right, Scarth, my heart. You're 100% right in both categories, really. So yeah. So what is? I gave up after it went wrong first time. Oh, it's okay, Space. You're. I love every time you flirt with me and every time you message me. Don't forget, she had me assassinated as a child too. I didn't have you assassinated. You happened to be assassinated. It was not by my hand. So what is on the agenda for tonight? Well, first of all, gender is a social construct. Secondly, we are going to be having a D&D Storytelling 101 stream. So I hope you're all excited for me to talk about storytelling and giving you potential insights on how to rethink the way you create a campaign / adventures to create a more fulfilling narrative or a more fulfilling story. So I know those are basically the same thing, but I don't know. I felt like I had a second point, and that was the one that came to me. I tried, Space. I tried. I had a lot of kids. It was hard to keep track of all my kids. In the end, Todd Howard took control of the Empire, so also hired assassin for target in the vicinity. Yes, one of the many Michaels was probably related to that assassination. But yeah, so the main topics we're going to be talking about today are setup and payoff, narrative threads, as well as genre shifts, and I have a bunch of community questions that were submitted to me about a month ago that I'm going to try and address as well. Aw, Space, you didn't want to get married to somebody probably related to you, because basically everyone in my empire was very close relatives. But let's hop on over to a different part of the throne room. And let's turn on some cool jams. These songs are Bardcore Rosen Radio. Medieval times, baby. I hope you guys are all excited for the standard D&D stream, Bardcore. So, how am I going to talk about this today? Just like money and value? Correct, Soulfang, correct. The first rule that I talk about in every one of these streams is at the end of the day, when you're thinking about a story, when you're thinking about a campaign, when you're just playing in a tabletop RPG, whoa, I usually prepare one slide, Master Fail. I usually have one slide that I write up at the start, and then it's all me just typing and scribbling. So, one of the primary things about D&D that everyone needs to remember, but sometimes people forget when they get really deeply involved in a given game or narrative, and that is that at its core, D&D/any tabletop RPG is you and your 4+ nerdiest friends getting together to tell a story and have fun. This is what I always call is the rule of fun. At the end of the day, everything in your campaign should ultimately lead to the rule of fun. It should all be trying to establish an enjoyable experience for everyone there. By enjoyable, that doesn't mean happy necessarily. Like, you can have a very satisfying sad experience, and I've got a story about that from last week? No, a couple weeks ago in D&D game I play on Saturdays. But it just has to be fulfilling for everyone involved. Hello, tape player. Welcome. So, for example, a story that is fun but isn't happy was a few weeks ago in Alistair Forgall's D&D game, Waifus and Warriors. My character had an emotional collapse at the events that happened during the session. Like, literally, she'd been on this quest for vengeance, and she had her vengeance denied her as the first time that she had seen her father in her life after he had banged her mom and left her mom after stealing her mom's magical item and source of her power, was literally him dying in front of her. So she didn't get to have any resolution, any closure to any of the issues that, or questions that she had had for him, that she'd been, basically had in her mind her whole life. And it led to this big emotional scene of her having a total meltdown, literally in the middle of the street, and talking to one of the other party members and just about how emotional she was. And at the end of the day, like, everybody was messaging each other after that session because it was so powerful, like, what had happened. And so that is not a happy thing, but it was a very fun thing. Like, it was fun to be a part of having that story done. So be sure to always remember that at the end of the day, people should walk away from a game time glad that they played. Nobody actually wins or loses in D&D. It's all about enjoying the experience itself. So that's the number one rule to keep in mind. She technically has an overarching purpose, which is more powerful than that, but that was, I will say, a good 30% of her life's goal was finding her dad and confronting him. Emotional damage. Hello, Vondanolo, my master of wiggles. Welcome. So now we're just going to talk about some of the nuances of actually writing a given story or campaign that you can utilize to basically strengthen the narrative experience, to create more resolution and more satisfaction from everyone involved. Not funny, but funny. Rin suffer emo. Poor Rin. He's just a big sad bean. Alright. So, like, really writing 101, like, real basics levels, comes down to these simple things that I've outlined for you. So, at the end of the day, a good story is one that has setups and payoffs. And the reason why those are so important for establishing a good narrative is because it basically brings things together. It helps bind the story and shows that things matter. Everything kind of matters. So what is setup? Setup is the placement of something for future use. This could be a thing, this could be an emotion, an interaction, etc. So, for example, setup. Your characters walk into an abandoned factory. while they're in this abandoned factory, they notice that the ground has a bunch of oil stains on it that they avoid. They're like, oh, this is weird. These oil stains look to be very slippery. All right, let's continue on our search of the dungeon. Payoff. Payoff is then using that previously placed thing to accomplish some aim. So, for example, in the oil in the factory example, an example payoff would be the party encounters bad guys. They start fleeing from the bad guys. As they're fleeing from the bad guys, they remember / notice the oil that was on the ground previously, and they use this to either A, make the bad guys run through it and slip and fall, or B, they set it on fire to create a distraction for the bad guy. So that is an example of a setup and a payoff in a story. And then a narrative thread is also kind of synonymous with narrative theme, and it's basically a theme reiterated throughout the story, for example, by using repeated setups and payoffs that demonstrate that point. So narrative thread is much more of a, I would say, a meta-analysis of the given story. So if you're writing an adventure and you have a particular theme, fire burn them all, suffer purge burn. They also have to be pretty flexible too, right? Since you don't know what they might be able to decide to do, to keep it flexible enough to adapt to their needs. Yes, Solfeg. They but again, the details about implementing this, I was just giving you an example to show it in action. But a narrative thread is like, for instance, you have a campaign where one of the overarching themes is domination versus allyship / friendship. So friendship is magic. So that could be the overarching theme of the campaign. The bad guy seeks to dominate. His minions are basically people pressed into service, people that he has control over, that he manipulates, etc. And so he is driven by domination. Now, running contra to that is allyship and friendship. And this would be something that would be established by having your given lucky group of adventurers deal with people, and in the end, it's the fact that they form, bonds that aren't related in a dominator-dominated kind of role, and they use this to be able to accomplish more and accomplish things more effectively than the bad guy ever could. And so how would you establish that? So along the way, you would have instances showing setups of people either imperiled by domination or people who are potential potential targets for allyship, and you would pay that off by having the fact that you chose to, ally with a given person ends up thwarting the plans of domination, for instance. So you can have that through numerous NPC interactions, through the use of exploration and information, stuff like that. So its narrative thread is kind of a philosophy that you have when you're writing a given adventure, campaign, or narrative. Hello, Black Skull. Welcome. There might be oil on the ground, or there might be a secret passage, but in reality, it just makes those up on the spot. Yeah, obviously, these are all my perspectives on things, and I'm trying to explain things in a way that you should be, as a DM, you should be approaching things more critically. Like, a lot of being a DM is improvisation. Like, I improvise probably 70% of a given D&D session. But there's a way you can do improv, which you can basically make it seem like it was all according to plan. And so, yeah. So this is what I was going to give you, is just like a basic idea. You should have probably a narrative theme, going through your adventure campaign. It really helps give focus to it and makes it not just a wandering group of adventurers slaying a dragon. Which it can be enjoyable, but isn't necessarily super deep or fulfilling. Patience is also a big part, yes. You think an opposing force in a campaign should be able to be summed up in a single concept, or is there room for complex antagonists in the RPG? You basically answered your own question. Yes, there is room for complex antagonists, and you don't have to always make a single aspect of bad guy. Those are just examples. They're the most traditional, but the problem is the more complex of an antagonist you make, the harder the job you have in telling the story, because you have to be able to express all of that to your players, and your players don't have the luxury of being able to see everything in the background. And so, at the end of the day, they may not pick up on a lot of the nuance and complexity that you're trying to demonstrate in your given antagonist. Like, usually I like to think of having complex plans, but that ultimately are distilled down to fairly straightforward concepts. For example, I ran a Dark Heresy 2nd Edition campaign where the meta-narrative of the campaign was there is a big bad guy who was defeated in a previous campaign who was trying to come back. And so he had one of his lieutenants basically fermenting discontent and rebellion in all these different planets by exploiting all these different factions to try and just weaken the regime as a whole. And so at the end of the day, that was basically the overall agenda of the bad guy. Within that agenda, there were a lot of complex parts. Each planet that the party went to, there was a different faction that had a very specific objective, that all of these different objectives were also not aware of the overarching objective. They were doing their own thing, but their own thing was being exploited to further the aims of the meta thing. And so there were different bad guys along the way who each had their own particular goals. Usually they were being misled in some way, and fomenting. Yes, I meant fomenting, not fermenting. I'm sorry. Even Obsidia makes mistakes with word use. So yeah, and so, but at the end of the day, the overall agenda was pretty straightforward. Bad guys trying to weaken the good guy, but you can demonstrate that in complex ways. The biggest thing, though, that you have to remember, and this is, well, I'm gonna underline this because it's extra super important. Never forget, that's a word, never forget the players are the main, where'd my word go? Are the main characters. I'll fucking draw some lines under this. It's one of the most important things you need to remember and that you can forget as a DM. Yeah, never forget. Delicious fermented rebels. So, never forget the players are the main characters here. And this is often a problem for DMs. Especially forever DMs. Because at the end of the day, you're not the one playing the game. You're the one in the same way as the players are. And so, you can put a lot of focus into your bad guys and stuff, into your NPCs, and you can make them so developed and deep, you begin to actually detract from the fact that at the end of the day, your players they're the main characters of the story. And so I feel like that's really important to remember when you're designing people. Players are just NPCs with decent AI. Yes, so That's what I'm saying. Like, do not get so enthralled with your own genius that you forget that the players are the main character. Still laughing and post this on me about Mage blowing up Dragon. How you deal with this kind of situation? And that's complicated to explain. We'll talk about the homebrew stuff later. I am a big fan of that 90% of the time that people try to cite physics, anatomy, etc. at you in a D&D game, to disregard it. Because you're in a world with magic and monsters, anything can happen any way you want it. But yeah, so the problem is with having an incredibly complex antagonist is, how do you represent that? And how do you represent that in a way that you don't make the focus then of the entire story in explaining how complex the antagonist is? Because you always have to remember, 90% of what you do as a DM for like background lore and stuff, players are never going to find out about, or it's not going to be relevant to them until it's relevant to them. And then you have to figure out how to actually provide it. So, I figured, like, probably the first thing you want to do when you're designing the campaign is, number one, figure out what kind of story you want to tell. Yeah, canon is bullshit. There is no canon in your RPG. It is ultimately your RPG. First discover the theme of the narrative that you want to tell is. Like, what is there, are you trying to make this something to bind it all together beyond a simple monster slaying? And even in the case of a monster slaying, is there more that you're trying to show in this monster slaying? And then, if so, then you can start building up how to demonstrate that narrative along the way. And we're gonna go, I'm gonna create a new slide for this as we talk about some of this stuff in action. So we're gonna talk about ways to establish setup and payoff. Okay. So I know what you're all thinking. But Obsidian, my players are dumb. My players are gremlins. What if they don't notice something? What if they consciously avoid it? So how do I get them to do to meet my setups and payoffs? First of all, nothing is solid until you make it so. This is gonna sound real dumb, but nothing exists until it exists. So this is the classic example of every town equals the town I want my players to go to. So this is that is that principle and example. Is every town is the town I want my players to go to. I have your solid right here. Thanks, crap. See, Master Fail, this has become you now. You think you're being funny and using it ironically, but no, this is your life now. So, yeah. Like, technically the players can't miss out on anything until you've told them they missed out on something. You always can drop something in later. You can always reframe it too. Like, oh, the players, like, missed the oil on the ground. Well, you know, maybe you should probably give them a way to find out about it. You know, it's like what I always say with never make anything necessary to your story hinge on the players succeeding a given die roll. So, and I guess this will go under number 2, which is, I'm not going to say kill your babies, which is actually the phrase in writing, but it's, kill your favorites. And what does that mean? Kill your favorites means, come up with a bunch of, I'm just going to call it S&P, for setups and payoffs. Come up with a bunch of S&Ps, but be prepared for them to not come up. Hey Hammer, welcome, welcome. I'm doing great, Hammer. I'm happy to have you here, the surprise hugger themselves. But yeah, so that's what I mean by kill your favorites. Like, you're gonna come up with a lot of setups and payoffs, and ultimately, like, you may not have your ability that nothing exists until it exists. Like, say the party left the factory. Like, they just fucking peaced out before the bad guys discovered them. Well, the oil didn't matter at that point. But it was there. You fool, you've triggered my hug card. Which goes to, now we're going to talk about, Chekhov's gun. Just like in a Nuzlocke name, love them and suffer. Oh, Nuzlocke. So, we've already established that you can make whatever happen whenever it happens. Because the players technically don't miss out on anything until you tell them they've missed out on everything. Number 2, we've told you, you gotta come up with a bunch of stuff because there might be times when the various setups you've created don't actually end up coming up at all. There is just no rational way that you can make a setup that you've dropped end up paying off because of what the players did. And that's just what it is. It is what it is. And next I'm going to explain the narrative principle of Chekhov's gun. Before that, Tape Player asked, how much do you try and weave player backstory into the main plot, or do you treat it like one-shots more or less? It depends. It genuinely depends, Tape Player. For me, I generally write overall linear campaigns. And however, if a player writes a backstory, that backstory will be relevant to the campaign in some way, shape, or form. There's always ways you can squeeze a backstory into even a pre-written campaign that you've done. For example, I use the Eberron game that I'm currently running, and that's where I wrote this. I wrote the whole plot line of the campaign down, and it's all centered around war criminals and weapons of mass destruction and stuff. So one of my players wrote a backstory where they were a part of a military unit that got basically their whole squad got killed off during the war, and they were the only survivor, but they were left with amnesia about what went down. And so they were ultimately proved innocent, but they never had resolution on the why. So guess what? The moment I had a chance come up where I could squeeze in that what happened to that player's squad into the campaign that I had already written, I did it. And so it became relevant. It wasn't necessarily like super game-breaking and necessary to the plot, but it made it so it was a part of the plot. They went to a basically a military research facility that was trying to make super soldiers, and the player discovered that her squad was basically sold off by the military to this project to be experimented on for the super soldier project, and ultimately died because of that. And then she was left as the scapegoat to detract attention away from the operation. And then I ended up making the boss, who I'd already kind of designed how I wanted it to function mechanically. I made it cosmetically based on her backstory, and it was basically this like gestalt ooze creature that was made from the souls and bodies of all of her squad mates, and it wanted vengeance against her. So that's an example of just using a backstory and squeezing it into the main plot. And then we've got a big Death Knight hug. Well, that can be arranged. Get your hugging utensils ready, everyone, because I'm coming in deep. And a 3, and a 2, and a burla. There you go. A big Death Knight hug from me to you. I hope you enjoyed it. Time to pull Chekhov's gun outside of Schrodinger's box. What if I want a 3D multi-tool Big Bungus Hug Center campaign? Well, then that's what between you and your DM to agree on. You'll love to see those hugging utensils. You'll love to see them. So, Chekhov's gun is the narrative principle that is a bunch of hentai. That is the wrong screen. Every element in a story must be necessary, and irrelevant elements should be removed. Elements should not appear to make false promises by never coming into play. So, every element of a story is necessary. The story, I guess, should be. I gotta do this. Should be. No. Necessary. There you go. Every element of a story should be necessary. The example is this the most is this the most important day moment in character's life? And if not, why aren't we watching that? This is no. Hey Ryan, welcome. my red herons. I make a gunslinger NPC named Chekhov. Turns out to be essential to the plot. I love it, Alistair. I love it. But yeah, the idea is, the classic example is if you show a gun in Act 1, it should be fired. It should be fired by Act 3. So that's the basic principle of Chekhov's gun, is that there is a gun on the stage, it should be fired by Act 3. Red herrings are an interesting part about it, because a red herring can still be necessary to the story. But the idea is there are limits to that. For example, if you're providing a bunch of information to a player about if you talk in detail, for instance, about the soldiers in this throne room and how they look and how they're dressed and stuff and their attitude, there should come a point at some point in the adventure or campaign where those soldiers, their gear, their personalities, etc., are relevant to furthering the story. And so, you should make it so, if you're spending the time describing something, it's gotta be a part of what you're trying to tell. Even atmosphere, when you're describing, oh yeah, everybody's in an inn, people are drinking and partying and having fun, that's one thing. But when you go into all the detail and stuff about something, and you're like, why did I need to know this at all? About introducing elements, not understanding that all of them must be necessary. I think, Vaughn, it's kind of, there is a greater focus on it in the core principle of Chekhov's gun about the necessity of them. Because it's a play thing where if you're doing a staged play, why is there stuff on stage if it's not necessary to telling the story you're telling? So that's part of what I think for that. But I'm using it here for RPGs and talking about how to introduce things into a story so that you don't lead the players astray into thinking stuff matters where it doesn't, or stuff doesn't matter where it does. And so, because of that, I think it's really important, because especially for a DM, where you get really fixated on your own world and all the lore writing and stuff you're doing, but at the end of the day, all the lore in the world, it doesn't really matter if it's not actually relevant to the story you're telling or to the player's action. It could give you context for why things are happening, why characters are the way they are, but at the end of the day, you don't really need to talk about it explicitly or introduce stuff from it if it's not actually contributing to the story you're telling. And for Ryan, I saw your redeem. Oh, Ryan, thank you so much for doing this redeem. You do it every stream since I've introduced it, and I know how much it means to you. So, Ryan, I'm just saying what we've all been thinking. It's that you, Ryan, yes, you are my little PogChamp. And there's nothing that can change that. There you go, Ryan. I hope you enjoyed that. Is there an actor on stage in Act 1? They must be used to bludgeon someone else by Act 3. But yeah, so that's just what I mean. Like, even a red herring can be relevant to telling your story. For example, in the Vox Machina TV show, because I never watched actual Critical Role, but in the TV show, there's a dragon causing mischief. It's a blue dragon. One of the ministers at this kingdom is a blue dude who's real shady, kind of an asshole. You obviously think, hey, maybe this guy is involved with the dragon. Maybe he is the dragon. And then as they start snooping into him, it is revealed that he was not in fact the dragon, and he was investigating the dragon because the dragon was actually another dude in court, who then proceeded to kill that sleazy guy in front of the players and showed his villainy. So even the red herring proved to be relevant to telling the story, but it's not like, oh yeah, this guy's really shady and it is possibly a dragon and stuff, and then the players check him out, he's like, no, I'm not. I'm actually not the dragon, and I'm sorry about being shady. And that's it. Like, that would be it. And that's like, that's ridiculous, and like a waste of everyone's time that you even went into that. But thank you for the resub, House Ordos. Thank you, subscribe for 4 months. You'll love to see it. Arise, brave knight. Chekhov's red herring. For those of you who don't know, House Ordos was actually a guy in my World of Warcraft classic guild, the Boys, back in the day. So we had many adventures together. I'm glad that he is still around and supporting me. And if you're actually watching right now, Ordos, I haven't had the surgery yet. I was just doing a consultation about it. So that's why I think you should think about Chekhov's gun and stuff when you're writing your story or adventure. It's about figuring out what are the necessary elements that you need to describe and add into your story in order to tell your story without necessarily wasting both your time and the players. I like the as we quote your Discord. So now we go to number 4, which this is another principle of writing, which is this the most important day/moment in a character's life? And if not, why aren't we watching that? This is something that everybody can definitely forget about when you get very involved in your own storytelling, is describing things which you think are super relevant and necessary, which actually aren't at all. Things that you think give like context or background and stuff could prove to be basically entirely pointless in the story, or could be done better in another way. Hello, Master Chaos, the Void Queen. That is a hell of a name. Welcome to the stream. Happy to have you. Done so wrong or too well, both emotionally and storytelling. Yeah. So, for example, if your character is talking about the time that, you know, he's like, man, back in my day, I used to fight this big epic battle against this dragon. But instead, I'm going to be making this cup of coffee right now. You're like, what the? Why are we watching the dragon battle? I want to see the dragon battle. Why the fuck do I care about your coffee making? Wow, buff lady. Well, I'm a death knight, so, you know, it's just a part of the life, Void Queen. You know, you gotta work those muscles. Swinging swords. Hi, I'm Rivera follows a non-binary trans lesbian girl. She, they, they, neo-pronoun. Welcome, welcome! Happy to have you, Rivera. Looks respectively, of course. Of course, of course. For those of you just coming in, I'm talking about D&D Storytelling 101. We're talking about setups and payoffs and how to, how to think about your scenes in your adventures and campaigns, to be able to tell a more compelling and fulfilling story. So, I'm going through some examples of, like, important things to know when you're trying to set this stuff up, because I feel like they're helpful. I used to be a Dragon Slayer, but then I took an arrow to my coffee pot, and then it was like Mondays, man. Makes my lesbian heart go squee. Ah, you love to see it. For those of you who are new, my name is Obsidia. I'm a Death Knight. What is that floating behind my head? It is a bone halo made of the spines of my enemies, and those I've hugged a little too tightly. Welcome, welcome. I say I'm looking disrespectfully, whatever that means. Thank you for the follow, Rivera. Welcome to the stream. I hope you enjoyed your Astolfo. Happy to have ya. And for those of you who don't know, I am a trans female streamer. My pronouns are she, her. Okay. So, yeah, this is, I think, really important for going back to the #1 rule of D&D, which is the rule of fun. And if you're wasting both, I guess, you and your players' time with entirely unnecessary storytelling, like, making your players, like, have to figure something out, like, that you give them no hints about, I think that's a waste of everyone's time. Watching people struggle just beyond a certain point is waste of everyone's time and is not fun for anybody involved. So when you're trying to do your story, really remember that to focus on what is the important stuff for your players to do/discover, and if you're not leading them towards that important stuff, or they're not doing that important stuff, why aren't we watching the important stuff? Oh, Cygnus is already a part of the Bone Halo. He has been here a long time, and I have squeezed many a spine out of him. So, yeah. So these are, I think, 4 really helpful things to understand when you are trying to create setups and payoffs in your story. Anybody have any questions about anything I've talked about so far? If so, now is the time. So a lot of these setups and payoffs can be, one of the things I always talk about too is info /deed over object/person. We're going to do this en español. Put exclamation points on either side. Oh my gosh! Thank you, Yami, for the resub. Oh my god. We also have a bunch of people. Cygnus/Masterfail/Vaughn, I guess. Any of my mods. Could you please shout out a bunch of people that have said hi? I forgot to address earlier. Could you please shout out Turkey Fluffs, Queen Space, and... I'm just going back through everybody who said hi. And Keelier. They're all wonderful streamers. Be sure to shout them out. Also, of course, shout out Yami, who is my favorite little cat boy. I was there at his debut. I was there at his re-debut. And I will be there at, I guess, all subsequent contractually binding debuts. I got no spine left to give, so I help collect others. The only one who's not a part of it. Too much Artorian rebellion, sad noises. Turkey Fluffs is also an amazing turkey VTuber. He is a lusty, busty turkey. Helie is an adorable, you misspelled her name, Vaughn. Helie is an adorable shadow dragon VTuber. And then Queen Space is an adorable German VTuber and Galaxy Brain Mario playing streamer. There we go. But yeah, be sure to check them out. He's doing me more often. I learn a lot from my campaigns. Oh yeah, and I have sorry, my eyes got stuff in my eye. Alright, there we go. If you haven't done so already, on my YouTube I post up the full VODs of all my streams, and I have a whole playlist of just like D&D storytelling stuff. So if you want to check out my previous storytelling streams, you can do so on my YouTube. They're very informative, I think, in my not entirely unbiased opinion. Helie is the best Borger dragon. Oh, hello, Consider. Can we also have a shout out for Consider, a very cute dragon VTuber who does very cute artwork as well, who's redeemed a big Death Knight hug. So get your hugging utensils ready, everyone, because I'm coming in deep. In a 3, and a 2, and a 4. There you go. A big Death Knight hug from me to you. I hope you enjoyed it. Alright, I'm trying to get this. There we go. Turn to. Alright, whatever. I tried. Alright, so what do I mean by info/deed over object/person? I'm going to underline this because I think this is something that's very important that people mess up all the time in D&D. There is no one thing, one person that derails a campaign. Never, ever design a storyline, a plot point, and etc. that requires a given object, a given person, or the players to make a given die roll. Like, the important part is you have the information, you have the acts that need to happen to further the story. Never tie those to a given thing. Oh, Vaughn also asked a question. And a spine left. Okay. Can you repeat the question? Because we got a lot of messages and I don't think I can see it. But yeah. Don't make a single person the party can kill that basically ends the campaign. If it's this is the Fallout 3 thing of, oh yeah, there's a guy you have to talk to find out the next clue of where your dad is. If you kill him, you're just fucked. Like, there's literally no other way to discover the info. So, yeah, like, don't make anything tied to a given person or place. You can always give the information to the players another way, through another means. Like, if they had to talk to somebody to find out something, and they didn't do that, make them, like, get a letter about it. Make them find it out in gossip or something. Like, make them, overhear another conversation, etc. You can always feed the players the info at any time in a campaign. Oh my gosh, Michael, thank you for the 1 bit. You dropped it on the ground? Well, I'm pocketing it. It's my citadel, after all. Video equivalent would be Moon Logic. Thank you for the resub, Litro. You love my content. Oh, thank you so much. We have a shout out, please, for Litro, a very cute Porter Dragon Knight. He is actually running his own D&D campaign tonight with some of my favorite streamers, such as Sif VTuber, Yulia, and Aster. please be sure to check him out later. He's running his... It's going to be, I think, the first session of his new campaign. But thank you for the resub. What might be bigger than this section, but how far ahead do you suggest writing a given story? Like, what would you say is the minimum of DMing? The thread of prophecy is severed. Restore a save game. Yes, consider. Yes, yes, yes. Never fucking do that. If you have one thing that you can take away from any of my D&D storytelling streams, never fucking do the Oblivion, or was it Morrowind thing of, with this character's death, the thread of prophecy is severed. Never do that. It's bad storytelling. And then, so for Vaughn's question, how far ahead? This is an interesting question because it's kind of, it depends. You know, everything I always say is like, it's always prefaced by it depends. Oh, it looks like I'm going to be robbing Michael of more bits. Thank you for the bits. Nom 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 nom. Yeah, so what happens is, my way that I write a story is I write the story I want to tell, which is like start to finish. So I do start to finish like the kind of story I want to tell as a framework. Like, I generally know how I want a story to begin, and I know how I want it to end, and then it's just a matter of filling up everything in between. So that's how I write. I know it's different for everyone, but my philosophy is you should know what's going to happen at the end of, it could be just an adventure, it could be an entire campaign. You should know what everything is going to be leading towards. And you should be able to have that done because that's so important for knowing how to be able to fill things up along the way. Like, if you don't know what's going to happen in the end, how do you know what plot points to give the players to lead up to it? Hey, Nas Carlo, welcome, welcome. So that's my basic philosophy, Vaughn. Know how something starts, know how something ends. You can always fill up the middle ground during play. And does anybody have any questions about anything I've talked about so far on this page before I switch over to a new page? Where I'm probably gonna just briefly write down the thing that I just told Vaughn about. Know how something starts, know how something ends, but fill up everything in the middle as it becomes relevant. And then, yeah, you should basically... This will be on the test. This will be on your story writing test. Alright. So, DM tips. I'll have DM writing tips. Number 1. Know how a story starts. Destroy. A story starts. And know how it ends. The middle can be filled in along the way. Number 2. The most important rule ever, which is never make something that ends the campaign. That ends the campaign prematurely. Exclamation points. Never make something that ends the campaign prematurely. They have to talk to somebody. Fuck it. They killed him. Well, there's somebody else who knows that info. Guess what? I was actually thinking about this today when I was when I was out walking to the bank. And it's, I've done these streams a couple of times now, and it's wild to me how many DMs feel like kind of weirdly powerless at their own stories. They're like, well, the players did X. I don't know how to continue the campaign after that. I'm like, who fucking cares if they did X? Make Y! they killed the prince that they needed to give them access to the magic vault. Fuck it. He had a key on him. Use that to get access to the magic vault. Like, there is nothing that should be preventing you from still giving the player something to further the plot. And if one NPC was the only person who had that, guess what? There's a million people out in the world the players have not interacted with. One of them knows that info. Alright, Yami, thank you for the lurk. I appreciate it. Work on some projects. You love to see it. So, yeah, like, you're never in a situation where the game just ends because the players did something you didn't think they were going to do. Which leads us to number 3. Players are dumb, irrational, and violent beasts. If let players engage the big bad early, players will find a way to kill him. Yes, yes, yes. I actually talked about that specifically in my first D&D Storytelling 101 about campaign design. So I'm not going to go in detail about that here because I did a whole thing explaining about why you should never let your big bad guy meet the players before he's supposed to meet the players. But yeah, know going into your story that players, you know, these could be the most genius people in their actual lives. These people could be brilliant storytellers and DMs in their own right. But the moment you put them as a player, players become the dumbest, most irrational, and violent people you will ever meet. And it's not their fault. Like, literally, we all do it. I, as a player, fall victim to this exact paradigm. It's something about being a player that it just causes you to be this way. So, you have to know going into it, your players are probably going to do things much dumber than you thought they were going to. They're probably going to be acting on very bizarre impulses, which are divorced from most logic that you can think of. And 3, they're going to try and kill it. You know, if it's something that is posed as something unkillable, there is a 99.9% chance your players will try and kill it. Like, brain no longer needs to work, correct. Are the most irrational and violent beasts out there given half the chance? Yes. So, just know when you're writing something, your players are gonna do one of these 3 things, and they're probably gonna do it a lot. So, don't structure things relying... I'm gonna do some drawing for this. 8. So, with this in mind, don't ever structure something assuming your players are going to do something intelligently, rationally, or peacefully. Don't write it. It's not going to happen. They're going to be crazy. The only way you could get them to act that way is if you force them to. So, yeah, just know that about your players. So, yeah. So those are some of the important things for setting it up. So, you know, with that in mind, you got your setups and your payoffs and you got your narrative thread. So, we all know the story we want to tell, the themes that are in that story, and a lot of this comes down to none of this stuff. Well, many of these things are not what's it called? Applicable for modules, unless you feel like doing a lot of work. So that's just a caveat to all of this. Yeah, stop underline. All right, so 4 is a caveat. Some of this stuff not super applicable to modules. And that's the problem of just the way that modules are written. In my opinion, like, pretty much every module is poorly written, with incredibly shitty power balancing. So unless you feel like turning on your brain more so than you probably want to to add in this stuff into your module, like, it's just not gonna happen. Like, you're gonna try to set up setups and payoffs, and it's not gonna work. Like, the way that Wizards of the Coast writes those things, they very rarely do them correctly. Very low IQ parties are some of the most fun to be a part of, though, and if the DM knows how to play along. Yep. Because I'm dumb, irrational, and peaceful. Here's number 5. This is another important thing to remember going along with your writing, especially for setups and payoffs. Failing forward. At any time your players fuck up, because they inevitably will, always have the story fail forward. What is failing forwards? It's the game never stalls because of failure. So, for example, your party tries to break into a prison to bust somebody out. Along the way, they fail. Something happens where, you know, they failed on their checks to, like, bust the lockout. They failed on their checks to, you know, pickpocket the guards, etc., to bust this person out. Now, this may appear that you've stalled the campaign, because how else are they going to accomplish this task now that they failed? However, there always has to be a way to succeed. So even if it makes their lives more difficult, still let their failure transition into forwarding the plot. So they failed their checks. They get, maybe at this point, they failed their checks. They get discovered by some guards. Now that they're discovered by some guards, they have to fight this battle against the guards. But when they kill them, one of the guards has the key to the cell that they need. So they then use that to bust the guy out of the jail cell. But now the prison has been alerted that they're there, and they have to escape now with pressure. But, you know, that way you've given them, like, yeah, they failed, but you're progressively moving things forward. There should not be a situation where you're telling their players they have not succeeded on something, and you just leave them at that. It's like, nope, you guys failed. What's your next plan? It's like, no, like, let it always be moving the plot forward, even when they fail. Yeah, basically, master fail. That is not the result you want to have. So, yeah, always think about keeping the momentum going in the game, because going back to square one is not enjoyable for anybody. It may seem like, oh, maybe they'll have to rethink their approach to the plan, but in the end, that really kind of slows down the game and detracts from... It puts them out of the experience that they've been going through. And so I think it's better to just let them fail forward. So you can always succeed in getting out of the frying pan, but you may not succeed at getting out of the fire. Is like the philosophy. So I'll put that out of the frying pan, but into the fire. That's literally in an RPG I played called Savage Worlds. There's an adventure card you can play as a player, which is called Out of the Frying Pan. And literally what it does is, somehow your characters get out of, like, the situation they're in, but they then get put into an infinitely worse one. So it's like, yeah, you're out of this thing. Now you're in a new one. Figure out how to deal with it. So I think that's a good approach to hop on. All right. Well, I hope you keep the small wolf company, Michael. I appreciate you coming by. Okay. So, but yeah, that's an important thing to know going forward. Thank you for the 10 bits, Michael. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about these tips that I've written down? It seems pretty straightforward, but it's stuff that people forget when they get in the mindset of being big hyphy DM. They often forget about a lot of these things. And especially when you get really involved in your own story, it's hard to think outside the box at a certain point. And remember that the ultimate goal is to have fun. Okay. Alright, well, if nobody has any questions, we're gonna move on to the community Q&A part. On there. Blup, blup. Okay. So, community Q&A. Could you give an example of falling forward into a worse situation? Okay. So failing forward into a worse situation. Okay, one of the classic examples is there is actually, as in after they failed, what could be worse exactly? Well, it could be, it could be different. Their stealth plan can turn into combat, and so they have to engage in combat at that point, which they did not plan on or prepare for, and it's obviously more dangerous, of course. And so that's an example of a way that they could have failed forward into a worse situation. Or it could be just it sets something up, like an environmental hazard or something pops up. For instance, your players are trying to flee from a group of guards in the prison escape, for instance. They're trying to escape from a group of guards with a prison escape. And so they then come into the situation of they've all failed their perception checks and everything. They can't see the laundry tunnel out of the prison, for instance. So they go into the so you have them run into the bathroom at this point, and they feel like they're cornered. They took a bad turn. Bad guys are on their heels. They're outnumbered. They're outgunned, etc. It could be at this point that this bathroom, for instance, was under construction, and a huge portion of it had been, hollowed out into the sewage system, and so now the players have to leap into this torrentially flooded sewer of various many sewer hazards in order to escape, but it comes with swimming check difficulties, potentially having some drowning issues. There could also be some monsters in the sewer now that they're gonna have to fight that they didn't plan on. So it's like stuff like that, I think, is a good way to think about failing forward into worse situation. And it doesn't necessarily have to be worse, it could just be different. The main point is, even if somebody fails, the plot should still be progressing. How is Obsidia so cute? I just am. Nanomachine son. Alright, so community Q&A. So after my second D&D storytelling stream, I asked in a bunch of Discords if people had questions they'd like me to ask. Like me to answer. An example that somebody gave was how to deal with rules lawyers. So, rules lawyers are interesting. We've all been a rules lawyer at some point in our lives, let's be honest. Because rules lawyering is it's generally born out of two things. It's born out of fear, or it's born out of being a dick. So generally, when you start rules lawyering in a game, rules upholder, control the narratives, you're probably becoming a rules lawyer because the players are being put in a position where they feel disempowered from the situation, or they feel like they're being cheated in a way, and so they're using the rules as written, for example, to try and defend themselves or weaken the enemy in some way. So that's where I say where it's born out of fear. The other one is them being a dick, which is the player just likes feeling in control and feeling correct, and so they think by controlling the narrative and the events along rules as written that they are basically establishing that form of control. This goes back to rule number 1 at the start of the stream. D&D is you and your 4 nerdiest friends getting together to tell a story and have fun. A lot of what this involves is stuff that could probably have been done at session 0. Where I haven't done a stream talking about session 0, partially because I feel like there's a lot of people who've talked about it and done a lot better job than I can. I would just be kind of regurgitating what they've said before. But in session 0, you should be able to talk about expectations that you have as the DM and expectations the players have of you. And talking about the rules as guidelines should be discussed instead. If you do not want to play rules as written, you should talk about that in session 0. And make sure it's clear that you will not abide by rules lawyering. I, for one, I have done rules lawyering many, many, many times. However, I cannot stand it because nothing makes me more defensive just as a person than when somebody is trying to accuse me of something. And people trying to, one-up me by, drawing me is not, I don't appreciate it. And so I will defend myself and basically become even more arbitrary. It's a personal failing, but it's something I'm very aware of. So that's my take. Partially a problem, with rules lawyers is it is not terribly common that you're playing D&D with people you don't know, or people that you, in theory, don't enjoy playing with. So if somebody's always a rules lawyer, why do you keep playing with them? And if you do keep playing with them, why don't you tell them to stop? So, that's the thing. This is presumably your friend. Just talk to them and be like, dude, stop being a dick. That's and this leads into my second topic, which is... wrong button. Nope. How to deal with rules lawyers? How to deal with min-maxers? Gosh darn it, messing up my move you now. Still make this work. There we go. I accuse you of being cute. Defend yourself, evil tour. I accept it. My mother has an expression which is, when you pick your hill to die on, you best be prepared to die. So I'm not willing to pick my hill to die on to being whether I'm cute, because I am cute. How to deal with min-maxers. So min-maxing is interesting because, metagaming is different than rules lawyering. Metagaming is using player knowledge, it's using player knowledge to basically control stuff in game. And the rules is not the kind of player knowledge that would fall under metagaming. Metagaming would be, for example, you have played Curse of Strahd. You know how the campaign goes. Metagaming is you using that knowledge to basically solve all the puzzles and stuff like that, and defeat the foes with your awareness of their weaknesses, etc. Hello, Dark Elf. Welcome, welcome. Beep boop. Thank you for the boop. And thank you for the follow, Riddick. Welcome to the stream. I hope you enjoyed your Astolfo. We're talking about Q&A questions right now. So, min-maxing is an interesting thing because it's hard to separate from optimization. So, min-maxing, for those of you who are potentially not aware, min-maxing is basically focusing on being very good at certain things at the expense of basically being terrible at everything else. And what happens is you become very, very, very good at something in an almost game-breakingly way, but you're awful at everything else. But you use the fact that you're really good at something to take away from the fact that you're really pretty garbage at other things. Most commonly, this is for combat purposes. Like min-maxing in the way you've designed your character to be very, very like focused on damage dealing, never gonna get hit, you can't hurt me at all, and so nothing can truly be a threat or a challenge to me because I am so good at combat. Broke min-maxing to win D&D, woke min-maxing to compensate for your terrible dice luck. Can we have a shout out please for Jin Quickspear, everybody's favorite little hedgehog knight, a certified cutie pie, a little prickly bottom. Been playing a lot of games. You know, he had a very big Dark Souls binge, but now he's playing Mother 3 a lot recently, which seems very Undertale-esque from what I've seen from him playing it. But he's a good beat. I do love my knights. Be sure to check him out. Oh my gosh, NJ Chef, thank you for the raid. Welcome, welcome, raiders. Happy to have ya. We are on the community Q&A part. And this is actually, I think NJ Chef was the one who asked me these questions that I'm answering right now. So, you know, your timing is good. How was Destiny 2? You still working through, I guess, Witch Queen content? But welcome, Raiders. For those of you who don't know, my name is Obsidia. I am a Death Knight. What is that floating behind my head? It is a bone halo, made of the spines of my enemies and those I've hugged a little too tightly. Welcome, welcome. Toby is a large fan of Mother, so Undertale having vibes in common is absolutely unsurprising. Oh, that would make sense then. By the way, hello, Effluent Effervescent. Yeah, I just talked about, rules lawyering. And part of it was, like, just tell them not to. Don't play with people who are rules lawyering if you don't want them to rules lawyer. It's kind of like the gist of it. So, min-maxing is generally people who are very optimized for combat purposes, but it can be stuff like being min-maxed to be based around being absolute charisma junkie. You're just the persuasion machine. Everyone has to... You get like your plus 20s to every roll you make to try and charm people, etc. So, in my opinion, a min-maxer is, as a whole, okay. It actually shouldn't affect your campaign terribly much. Because at the end of the day, the min-maxer is very good at one thing, presumably, such as combat. But that means they're not good at anything else. So, always put them in situations where they're not in combat, for instance. But the trade-off is, you don't want to punish somebody for making their character very good at something. Like, one of the examples that I know from a game I played in that I then left for different reasons, but Yuko was playing the charisma character of the party. They had spent so much XP buying better charisma and buying better persuasion skills, to the point where on like a D100, they were rolling like basically 160 or less was them succeeding. The only way they could fail is if they critically failed. So the DM, in the wake of this, instead of figuring out an alternative way to deal with it, started giving Yuko arbitrary penalties to their checks. Like, entirely irrational penalties. They're like, if you're talking to somebody, it's like a -60 to your roll. And Yuko was like, but why? And they were like, because otherwise you can't fail. And that's not a very good argument for why something is becoming difficult for somebody. Like, they've designed their character to be good at this. You shouldn't punish them for being good at it. If you get my drift. Like, at the end of the day, like, always remember that persuasion is not mind control. It's just people like you, but it's not like, oh yeah, well, you know, you rolled really well, so I guess I'm gonna kill myself. Like, yeah, it's... Don't punish somebody for that. D&D is largely based around people optimizing themselves to do their particular role in a party well. In my opinion, most well-done parties involve people who are optimized for their particular character. That way, together, everyone is optimized as a unit. You all make up for each other's weaknesses. So, I am not super against min-maxers. It can be hard at times to balance combat against a min-maxer. But that's why, at the end of the day, the enemy has as many hit points as I say the enemy has. Like, you know, let them flex how strong they are and how hard they are to kill, but still let the bad guy kind of, you know, do stuff. Currently fight your whole family to death. Charm is all I'm good at. So that's my perspective on min-maxers. And remember, you can be min-max and still be a very compelling character. Hello, Angus. Welcome, welcome. Happy to have you. For example, it's not true min-maxing, but for optimization, my D&D character I play on Saturday, Rin Valren, she is totally optimized for combat. She is a fighter rogue. She's really good at fighting. She's got all these kind of like wild shit I can do in combat to beat people up really effectively. She also has 6 charisma and no charisma skills whatsoever. However, Rin is a very compelling character who actually talks a lot considering the fact that she has no real charisma ability. And I just reflect her really shitty charisma ability in how she interacts with people. She's kind of a dick to everyone, because she's a huge tsundere. But, you know, I can't succeed at things that involve talking to people, really. So, I don't view that as something that I need to be good at. I can still enjoy playing the character, even though she's really good at combat. She spends most of the game not actually fighting anything, but it's still fun for everybody involved. So, like, min-maxers are much less of an issue, and when you think of the game as things are statted however I want them to be statted, min-maxers really aren't that powerful or game-breaking in their own way. So, that's my 2 cents about min-maxing. Thomas the Tactician asked, when we're talking rules lawyers, we're talking about people who abuse their knowledge of the rule to gain an unfair advantage, right? Not the ones who legitimately help new players. Yeah. We're talking about people who be like, sorry, you can't move there because the space won't allow you. Because you are too big, you can't squeeze in, for instance. Or, I'm sorry, the rule says that I only can get grappled if they use both hands, and you're only grappling me with one hand, therefore it's invalid. Stuff like that. It's really trying to use the rules to gain an advantage during a given session. Yeah, someone actively trying to break the game, spoiler alert, is somebody you shouldn't be playing with. I go back to rule 1, D&D is you and your 4+ nerdiest friends, having fun together and telling a story. And if one of those people is actively trying to ruin the experience of other people or break the game, you should not be playing with them. They are not invested in ensuring people have fun. Other weaknesses, low spotlight. Yeah, I've got a whole other thing that somebody brought up about spotlight hoggers, which is something else I'm going to talk about. Oh, Nina. First of all, can we have a shout out, please, for I mean, I'm sorry, not Nina. Nikki. Hello, Nikki. Welcome. I'm sorry, I confused you with another dragon. Hello, Nikki. You've decided to do my bottom redeem? Okay. I'm gonna get going. I think I need to get some relaxation or sleep. Okay, Yami. I hope you have a great snooze and the sweetest of dreams. I will upload this video to my YouTube this weekend if you feel like watching it. Yeah. Of course, Effluent Vassive Essence. Like, I shouldn't have to say it, like, but obviously, everything comes down to if the players agree to it, if the DM agrees to it, you can do whatever the fuck you want. You could have your game be content warning the gaming experience, if that's what everybody in your group has agreed to. Ultimately, I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm making things that are based on very overarching, like, rule concepts. But, like, yes, there's an exception to everything. Your group could decide that none of the stuff I've said matters. I frankly don't care if they've decided that. That's what you guys, that's the game you want to play. That's fine with me. I'm not a part of your group. Hello, Insanistar. Welcome. How are you doing? My queen of bits. So for Nikki, here we go. Oh, Nikki, I see you've decided to do this redeem so that anybody watching this stream, anybody watching this VOD, they're gonna know just exactly what you are. And as you sit there on your knees just begging for my attention, they'll all know you're nothing but just a little bottom. But it's okay, Nikki, because I love my bottoms. So as I walk up to you, look pleadingly up at me, I'll put one finger under your chin to look me in the eye, and I'll say, oh, sugar. Yes, you are such a good girl. You're such a good girl. Just the cutest little bottom. There you go, Nikki. I hope you enjoyed that. But yeah, so that's how to deal with min-maxers. So we're now going to go into Spotlight Hogs. So, I should probably put the how to deal with part first, too. So, how to deal with Spotlight Hog. So, Spotlight Hog is basically the one or more players which constantly makes the game about them. Focuses on them, talks over other players, intrudes themselves in other players' scenes, etc. This, once again, goes back to rule number 1, about your friends. Like, if you know your friends do this, talk to your fucking friends about it. Make it clear. Like, very rarely is this something that is done by somebody maliciously. It is mostly because they view themselves or their character as particularly interesting, they want to be involved, etc. And so, if aside from talking to them about it, one of the things I do is when you've got really, like, kind of quiet players, because not every player is an assertive role-playing powerhouse, I'll just cut you off. If you're, like, talking over somebody, I'll be like, Vonadolo, stop. Alright, Insanistar, what are you doing? And so I'll just be like, no, I'll just cut you off. I don't fucking care. Like, but that's just me as a person. Like, I want everybody to have their chance to do stuff. And if you're talking, and once you've seen that somebody will do, like, a lot of talking and stuff, you will generally do them last, and make sure, like, the quieter players get a chance to do stuff before you address them. Because that way, you know, everybody kind of gets their fix. But, yeah, and another thing is, you just be like, people are in a town, I'll be like, I'll go down the line. What is your character doing in the town? What is your character doing in the town? And then once they've all established the things that they're doing, I'll then go one by one to each of them and start doing their vignettes. But, yeah, and don't be afraid to tell a Spotlight Hog or just shut the fuck up. Like, in theory, you should know them and they shouldn't do it anymore. But do not be afraid to cut somebody off if you feel like they are intruding on other people's fun. Because the ultimate goal here is everyone should feel included and everyone should have fun. I'm glad to see you, you blushing, Nikki, over that redeem. You'll love to see it. All right. Next question. This one was how to deal with lycanthropes. Lycanthropes and how to use them. How to sue them? That's a very different game. Curse of Strahd, attorney at law. Lycanthropes and how to use them. So, lycanthropes, for those of you who don't know, are the various were things. Were tigers, were rats, were wolves, were bears, were boars, were ravens, etc. In D&D, were things are usually divided between two categories. Number one is people, maybe she's born with it, maybe it's Maybelline. It's the people who are just born lycanthropes. Their mom, dad were lycanthropes, they inherited it. And generally in normal D&D, those people can be whatever they want to be. Then there's people who get infected with it, because most were things, it's a disease. It's like a spiritual disease that infects you. Were vampires... I'm only a vampire on the full moon. It's a disease that infects you that when, like, the full moon happens, for example, that's for, like, werewolves historically, but it could be any kind of triggering event. Your person turns into this monstrous creature combining animal and person. And generally, in those situations, they can't control it, and they have to act a certain way. So, how do I use them in my games? Well, it's easy. I don't. In my opinion, lycanthropes lend themselves to a very specific narrative, usually involving tragedy, because they're people who are infected with it beyond their control, or it's somebody who has to deal with the burden of turning into something beyond their control. Oh well, thank you for the lurk, Nina. Can we have a shout out, please, for Nina, the Dijon Dragon King? So yeah, I don't really use them because I just don't really tell stories that tell that kind of narrative, and I don't know, it's weird to me. A lot of things involving diseases like lycanthropy are kind of problematic, because at their core they come with a lot of STD baggage, in my opinion. Like, you can see a clear parallel between lycanthropy and like HIV/AIDS. It's something that it's, you know, generally these people are infected with it beyond their control, and it prevents them from doing things, and they get largely vilified by society as a whole because of it, and it's something that they can potentially infect others with. And I find that incredibly problematic. And so I don't like to do that, because I feel like that kind of forced infection baggage is just not worth... It's a story not worth telling. And so I don't think it's enjoyable, and I just frankly don't... I'm not super comfortable with telling something like that. Because in the alternative, you have lycanthropes just as a monster that the players are just wantonly killing because they're infected with this disease, which is also really problematic at its core. So, like, I prefer lycanthropy as just a form of stuff you're born with, not as actually an infection. Like, some people, they're just born werewolves. That's just what they are. It's okay. They can turn into a wolf person, they can woo at the moon, and, you know, just live their life. They have their little puppies, and, you know, they bark. I don't know. So, I don't like lycanthropy as a disease. I think it's fine if you just have them be, you know, animal people. That's whatever. But I just don't like infectious disease stuff like that. For those of you who don't know, I work in, like, AIDS relief. So this is something where it's like, yeah, I very much understand the other side of this, and I'm not terribly cool with it. No, I'm totally fine with shifters. And I actually think shifters are perfectly fine. Because they're just born with it. They're just animal people. Literally in my Eberron campaign, lycanthropy and shifters are viewed historically with disdain by one of the main religious organizations. That's because the religious organization is bad. But animal people is totally fine. Like, you want to be a shifter, turn into animal stuff, that's fine. I don't care. But it's not something that you're infecting people with it. It's not a problem that you're an animal person and you turn, I guess, more animally. You don't spread your animaliness short of just, the old-fashioned way, pants grabbing your way into somebody. So I don't have a problem with shifters. Welcome back, Michael. Happy to have you. We're going through community questions. All right. 5 was actually a 3-part question. Yeah. And, in my opinion, I usually play shifters. I usually run shifters in my games where they're basically like classic animal people from anime. So, cat girls, fox boys, stuff like that. That's how your shifter is. It's just you, channeling more of your animal-y bits when you go shifter mode. But normally, you just look like a cat girl. And I think everybody's okay with that because most people who play D&D are a bunch of weebs. So this was a 3-part question somebody asked, which is fast combats, interesting NPCs, and their third question I didn't really understand, because it was how to handle spellcasting, which I don't really know. That's a really open-ended question, so I'm not gonna address it. And thank you for the resub, Ethereal Koala. It's hard to believe it's been 4 months since you found me playing Horizon Zero Dawn. But I'm happy to have you. I actually talked about you on a Twitter post I made, and your comment to how you would wait years for me to play Horizon Forbidden West because you liked my Zero Dawn content so much, that really made me happy. So I made a post talking about how awesome that was. So fast combats and interesting NPCs. Fast combats are, in part, it's just combat design. I talked about this in a previous stream I did about this subject. It's basically, a lot of it comes down to, don't ever make a fight just you versus hit point sponge. That's not interesting for anybody involved. Make it so that there's dynamic stuff happening. Make it so there's multiple people the players have to deal with. Don't just throw a shit ton of mooks at them. That's going to slow down initiative. Also, group mooks by initiative. If somebody's weak enough compared to the players where you know that they're not going to be a threat 1v1, do 3, do 4, do 5 of them all together who fall under the same initiative. Just to speed things along. So that's my advice for fast combats. Interesting NPCs. This is more complicated because part of it is based on... part of it is just based on how you do what your players want to see. I usually find a good guide for making interesting NPCs is watch TV. So, what do you like about a character in a given TV show or movie or cartoon or whatever? What are the things that you like about them? What do you think makes them interesting as a character? Now just plagiarize that. That is basically the cheat code. And one of the things that I always say for making interesting NPCs is know your party's tastes. One of my gaming groups, I know that they just innately like and trust women more than men. It's just how they are. So I made all of the NPC companions that they recruited were all women, except for one, which was an exception. But they were almost all women because it was just a cheat code for making the players trust them and want to be nice to them for. And then another thing is remember to like start off with making the NPC involved with the party. Like make it so that if you want an interesting NPC, their stuff has to directly relate to like what the party is doing. Also give them something just like unique about them. For instance, an interesting NPC I dealt with in Alistair Forgill's campaign a couple of Saturdays ago was a Goliath like wizard tailor. And he would use his magic to like basically design clothes perfectly for you. And he was very outlandish and ridiculous. And I'm like, that's interesting. That's memorable. It's a comparatively minor NPC, but it was something that stood out to me. Also, thank you for the bits, Michael. You love bits. Seriously, stop taking your bits. I refuse, Michael. I'll take them all. And thank you for the 100 bits of Ethereal Koala. Hi, flag. We gay as fuck up in this stream. But yeah, so like, basically plagiarize what you like about NPCs, about characters from any other media you interact with, and figure out ways to use that in your campaign. That's basically the easiest cheat code to make an interesting NPC. Next question. This one is interesting. Alright, so it's the post red card. Trying to figure out how to phrase this. Post red card, getting game back on track. So, before I get into this, actually, I'm going to talk about some random interesting NPCs. So, one of my NPCs in my Eberron campaign was basically, Lena. Was it Lena? No, Mila. It's basically Mila from Monster Musume. She was a Lamia girl. And I just basically based her on that, and players loved her. And then I had a NPC companion for the party, Larissa Stormtalon, who's a Harpy Bard, that I based her on a cross between basically like every Valley Girl in Clueless and Poppy from Monster Musume. Monster Musume is just a great source of how to make wacky monster NPCs for your party to talk to. So yeah, those are examples of like plagiarizing personalities and stuff from pop culture to bring them into your game. And then like I also had a tiefling Hexblade captain of the guards in charge of this town, who was based on Lin Beifong from Legend of Korra. So feel free to steal people's personalities. So here we're going to talk about post-red card, getting the game back on track. So what is the red card? This is something that's talked about a lot for Session Zeros. It is a player safety mechanism. It's a player safety mechanism where if a player is feeling uncomfortable with a given situation, stuff that's happening, a scene, etc., they do something called, it's using the red card, using an X card, something along those lines. And basically what that means is that is a end the scene immediately, end whatever is the uncomfortable thing that is going on, and move on from it. And so this is something I have never had happen in a campaign. I haven't played in groups that have used red card mechanics before, but I've also played in people where we've known each other a long time, so we kind of know what's okay and not okay. But it is something, if you are playing in a group, you should have these kind of safety mechanisms in place, because role-playing can be a very vulnerable time for people, and you might walk into a lot of people's trauma or triggers and stuff without realizing it. This is partly why I say never, ever, 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 ever do sexual assault in your role-playing game. Never, ever. Don't have NPCs who do it, don't have players who do it, nothing. Like, because no matter how compelling you may think it may be to a story, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna fuck it up, you're gonna handle it poorly, and a lot of people have to deal with that in their lives that you don't know about, and you could be like resurfacing their trauma. So never, ever, 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 ever do sexual assault in your game. I don't care how fucking great you think you're handling it. Just don't do it. You're going to fuck it up. So that's the thing about red cards. This is also talked about in session 0. Basically identifying potential themes or content warnings about the campaign that you're going to have people play in, and make sure that people respond to that in whether they're okay with some of those themes or content warnings, and if not, don't do them. Design the campaign differently. Because everyone is here to have fun. You don't want people to be triggered or traumatized or re-traumatized by their experience playing pretensies with you. So, for post red card getting the game back on track, I think actually a break is probably the most appropriate thing. It might slow down the game, but if somebody's red carding, I think it's important to take a step away from the game and do like a comfort check with everybody. And if the person who red carded feels comfortable with it, make sure it's clear that they can talk to you about what happened and why they did not feel comfortable with the scene, and then, you know, move on. Just figure out a different way to handle things. So that's, in my opinion, the best thing to do is give a little bit of time and distance from the incident, and then return to it with everybody, you know, getting some chance to cool down, and get back into playing the game. Alright, number 7. How to adapt to players... This is a good one. This is one of the things I've been talking about always. Oops, but how to adapt to players' decisions, i.e. derailing the game. Thankfully not as the end, but they left me uncomfortable way that lingered for months. Big respect for that rule. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. This is like a whole rant I have about anime, and it's the biggest perpetrators, I will say, of trying to use sexual assault to tell their story is people trying to establish how dark their world is. Trying to establish dark fantasy, for instance. Like, this is one of the things that I really find distasteful about Goblin Slayer is the way they handle sexual abuse as a part of the world, because I feel like it's entirely unnecessary and it's incredibly sexist and chauvinistic to have it in it the way they do. And so, just don't do it. I don't care how fucking dark your game is. Don't do it. And then going back to my previous statement, you know, I said earlier about, you know, play whatever game you want to play. Sure, you know, if your whole crew is fine with it, you know, more power to you. I think it's fucked up, but, you know, if you guys want all of that in your game, then that's the game you want to play in. I'm not the one playing in your game. I don't have to deal with it. It's not my problem. So, how to adapt to players' decisions, and i.e. derailing the game. I talked about this in my campaign design stream. I also talked about it here today. And the ultimate thing is, players can never derail your campaign. If the players do something like, I remember Captain Matt talked about it, where the DM created this war campaign, and he didn't, or his character, whatever, didn't want to be in it, wanted to like start a bakery or something. And in the end, the entire group decided to, you know, just say, fuck it, we're not going to be a part of the war, we're going to go do a bakery. Like, in my opinion, it's a bit disingenuous to the campaign that not everybody was on the same page, that they wanted to play in a war campaign. So, run the game the players want to play in. Players, play in the game that you want to play in. Don't make the game into something it's not. you want to, if the DM is like, hey, so I've got this big, it's going to be a battlefield, war fighting campaign, military stuff, a lot of combat, everything. The players are like, okay, cool, yeah, we're totally fine with that. Then, halfway through it, they're like, yeah, we want to do a political campaign with lots of intrigue and stuff. You're like, well, it's kind of unfair to me for having written a narrative that I thought was what you wanted to do. And at that point, I think the most appropriate thing is to basically sit down with everybody and be like, as a DM, do you feel comfortable doing this different campaign? And if not, then like, what's the next game you guys are going to play? Because it's not fair to you to have to redo everything because your players basically decided they didn't want to do it. But everybody should be flexible to the idea of nobody should be playing a game they don't want to play it. Like, you don't want to run the game, they don't want to play in the game, and just don't fucking do it. Just be like, all right, guys, we're just going to go do something else. Fine. We're just going to, drink beers and play Fortnite. And then the other part of that is, as I said, nothing exists until it exists. The players can't truly derail a campaign by their own ineptitude if they don't have the ability to. So that's my long and short about that. All right, next question. All right, rules as written versus house rules. Versus house rules. I don't know why I always misspell house. So this is always a struggle. My opinion, best way to approach it is, this is once again a session 0 thing. Talk about everybody initially, like, stuff you are doing differently than raw. There's a base assumption that a game is raw until they are told otherwise. So if you don't plan on playing things raw, make sure everybody is on the same page that that's the situation. And house rules, homebrews, etc. are totally fine as long as everyone agrees to them. I have a bunch of like house rules that I use in games I run because they're just ways I like to play the game. So, like for instance, I've been playing several campaigns where we don't do concentration checks. Concentration is only, you maintain a spell until you cast another spell, basically. And that's fine. Like, I don't necessarily find a big issue with that. It goes both ways, so the enemies also have that, which is for their buffs and everything. Also, like, letting people shoot in melee. It's like, if you're a character that's, a ranged character, I don't really care if you shoot a bow in melee. It doesn't really bother me. I've played a lot of campaigns that have done that, which is fine. It changes the game in a way when you do it that way, because there's a whole strategy about physically engaging casters, archers, etc. that you no longer can do once people can still shoot you within 5 feet. But like, it's one of those things. I think it lets you focus more on being the kind of character you want to be. Like, you want to be an archer? Sure. You shoot people in melee. I don't really care. So those are some rules that I've played with, and it's just make sure everybody's on the same page with that. And then I always have a disclaimer at the start of my games that all of my rules are subject to change as the campaign progresses, because while I have been playing D&D and other tabletop RPGs for over 20 years, I'll always run into things that I didn't think were going to happen or unexpected things, and I might have to change rules on the spot or going forward in light of stuff that has happened. And I don't try to be arbitrary about it. I try to do it to ensure the game remains balanced and fun. But I just like make it clear. It's like I'm fallible. Like, this stuff may change. And hello, Silent Warlock Cosplay. Can we please have a shout out for them? They're one of my players in my Tuesday Eberron campaign. They are now playing in our playtesting of my homebrew campaign. They are playing a buddy person, basically spellcasting barbarian. And they're very cool. They do a lot of cosplay because of their name. And so they also stream some of their cosplay construction processes and stuff. Very good beat. So that's my take on Raw versus House Rules. Yeah, Session 0. Session 0. Yeah, a lot of these problems are resolved by Session 0. So I feel kind of weird having to say over and over again, like, Session 0, but it's really the case. So this one is interesting. So this is how, as a DM, how to set a scene. Swole bunny with magic. So somebody asked me specifically, they wanted to see a video about something that a lot of DMs struggle with, which is how to set a scene. Specifically, which details to include and which to omit, when and how to make changes, and maybe what resources are useful for helping fill in the gaps on the fly. So part of this as a scene is, in my opinion, what is relevant to the players in the scene. It'd help if I spelled scene correctly. What is relevant to the players? Like, at the end of the day, describe stuff that is going to be relevant to what the players are going to be interacting with in the given situation. Don't go into needless detail about stuff that's ultimately irrelevant. Also, keep your perspective on the purpose of the scene, what information is necessary to tell that scene, and create the appropriate atmosphere. And then, when in doubt, odd or even. This is the biggest thing I have just learned over the years in role-playing. I've done it in every campaign I've ever run for the last several years. Everybody who I've played in campaigns with it have since adopted it as a rule, and I think it's possibly the best thing you can do as a DM. When in doubt, odd or even. So, I think this is... What are you doing? Was not how I wanted that presented at all. Okay, there we go. When in doubt, odd or even. So, there are a bazillion situations your players will think up during a given session. You are not your players. You're not their characters. Your players will surprise you with the random shit that they decide to do, look for, become invested in, etc. So, so if you're presented with something where you don't have a given answer, prepared for, something that the players ask for, I always just say odd or even. And I just roll a die and I have them call if it's odd or even. Whatever they call, that's the result that goes in their favor. And the opposite usually indicates it did not go in their favor in some way. So, player asks, for instance, hey, I'm at this bar. Is there a Goliath there? Is there a Goliath girl there that I can go talk to? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Why the fuck does he want to go talk to a Goliath girl? All right, odd or even. And they say odd, and a 3 is rolled. I'm like, yes, there is a Goliath girl. And, he goes and talks to her. And that's how it works. Hey, you're in an alleyway, and you're about to fight this battle. Player goes, so, is there a dumpster in this alleyway nearby? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I didn't think that'd be relevant. Odd or even. And it's they get it. Okay, there is a dumpster there. What do you do? It's a part of the philosophy of failing forward is it's just improv on the fly. Stuff, it doesn't ultimately matter a lot of the time. And so if it didn't matter enough for you to think it up in the first place, it probably doesn't matter enough for you to become super invested if it's there or not. So when in doubt, odd or even, just leave it to chance. One result is pro the player's desired outcome. The other result is opposite the player's desired outcome. How much detail should you go into when players specifically ask about stuff during the role play? What can I see of the building in the distance? That's another example of odd or even, master fail. if it was not something you prepared, which you didn't think was relevant, but I guess could be relevant to what the player's interests are, first of all, you could just ask them, like, hey, why are you asking that? And they'll say, like, oh, I'm wondering how much I can see that building in the distance because I think that there might be a sniper there, based on the scene. Okay. Well, suddenly there's now the chance of a sniper being there because that's a good idea, and I didn't think of that. A lot of time, you steal ideas from your players as they bring them up during a session. So yeah, it's like if something doesn't really matter, just leave it up to chance. Like, okay, how much of the building can I see? All right, make an odd or even. All right, they rolled well. All right, now make a perception check to see how well you can actually see potentially something in the distance that's relevant to your choice. Goliath girls, though, I know, Alistair, Nia, I know. As somebody playing a 7-foot-tall Oni girl, I am very aware of tall muscle girls. They are my weakness. They make the rockin' world go round. I never played Alan Wake Master Fail, so I don't really know the reference. But yeah, that's my perspective on it. Is if you didn't think of something, just do odd or even. Like, this is a cooperative storytelling experience. Let your players flesh out the scene as well. Like, they want there to be X, Y, or Z thing. Give them the chance that it's there. So that's my perspective on setting up a scene. And then the last question was, how do you handle having multiple big plot hooks in one world? How do you detail things like kingdoms and politics? How to handle several big plot points at once. Makes written stories come true and is very happy to fill in any plot holes left with malicious intent. Ah, yes, Master Fail, basically. So this was asked by somebody who was particularly invested with minutia of, like, world building, basically. So, in my opinion, the world is only as relevant, or the world is only as developed for plot points as they are relevant to the party. I don't particularly get super invested in, like, creating a lot of overarching plot issues with, like, kingdoms and politics and factions and stuff happening in the background if it is not relevant to the story I'm trying to tell, and the story I'm trying to tell specifically to the player. Because it doesn't matter. Like, if you're playing a detective investigation campaign in a given city, the factional struggles of the power politics of a neighboring kingdom are not super relevant to the campaign story that you're telling. So there's not really much reason to go into them. So, like, I don't care about the lumber production of a barony that the players are not involved in. Is kind of the moral of the story. Like, things are only as relevant as they are relevant to the player. Is the long and short of it. And I think that also is just a huge thing as the DM, is it keeps things more focused for you, because you can't think up everything. And, like, a lot of it is stuff you're going to make up on the spot for relevance, for, like, these factional issues and stuff, but expecting you to have, like, your Charlie Day conspiracy board of like, everything happening in the world itself, regardless of if it affects the party or the narrative at all, I think is a huge waste of time. And it can be fun as a creative exercise, but I think that your time is probably better spent on other things than that kind of world building. All right, those were the 10 community questions that were asked of me by some different people. Does anybody have any questions on anything I raised, any of the explanations I gave, or would you like me to go into more detail about anything? If not, let me know if you guys have any questions that you'd like me to ask, that you'd like to ask me right now. And I will do my best to try and answer them. I'm just flipping around to different places. Looking for the business. Okay. In the absence of any questions, have you actually done a detective campaign? I have. I haven't. I actually did run a detective adventure in one of my campaigns, and I've played in a campaign as a dedicated investigator. It was actually a campaign I played with Graf Yukiko, who was DMing it, and I actually did have a Charlie Day conspiracy board of notes in real life of like me writing down campaign threads and connecting them and putting clues together and stuff. And I was actually right. That was the best part about it. They can be a lot of fun. They're just kind of hard to do because you have to be kind of big brain about it. But you also have to be big brain prepared for really, really small brain players. Because as I said, most players are dumb. Some of my best plays on D&D were as a flirty bard, barmaid, seduced, old lady super clerk selling potions, seduced, married orc, general boss, seduced, Thrice and his wife too. Oh, hello Shania, welcome. We're safe for my dingy dog. I have played the total man whore character before. I personally, you know, it is a character trope / cliche I've kind of grown out of. I don't find it terribly compelling or enjoyable or at this point original to even go into that. So, but it is as old as the day is long. Everybody has done that. Everybody. All right. So if we don't have any community questions or any more community questions, then I am going to launch into something else. File new. We're gonna do a brief talk of my world building from my my homebrew campaign. So, homebrew campaign ideas. I'll be sure to put in Obsidias. Okay. So, for those of you who've been to my streams before, or have listened to me in any TTRPG channel in anybody's Discord I'm in, I have been working on this homebrew, Arcano, steampunk kind of D&D setting. And so I actually came up with some new thoughts, I guess, ideas since my previous stream specifically about it. And so I thought I would use this opportunity to talk about them. But before I do, something one of my friends who's an excellent DM has done is incorporate investigation sections, otherwise normal campaign. Basically, in some situations, we would all be given a number of turns, actions, to search and gather clues before a thing would occur to put an end to this. The amount of info we got would have an impact on the next events. Yes, that is a very good idea, Alistair Nia. I'm actually, before I go into this, we're actually gonna do it aside. I'm just delete it. And there we go. That loves playing bard but hates the horny stereotype, friendly and diplomatic, not constantly hitting on people. You love to see it. All right, so we're going to talk about, this is something I meant to talk about originally. So genre shifts. Okay, what is a genre shift? I am a huge fan of genre shifts. So I think when done well, it really spices up a campaign. So, for instance, I ran a Dark Heresy like investigative campaign, and this is like a science fiction, grim dark world universe kind of campaign. So I decided in one of their adventures was basically to isekai my party. I had them enter into a digital fantasy world where I took away their characters and I gave them new characters that were basically designed as opposites of the character they played during the campaign itself. So like the gunfighter, for instance, became the melee character. The big damage dealer became the healer, etc. And I built them as like a fantasy adventuring party in like a Final Fantasy / D&D kind of game. And it was the bad guys were represented through in-game avatars that they had to overcome in order to escape from the digital world, essentially, i.e. Digimon. And so my players fucking loved this. They had so much fun playing as their little fantasy characters, leveling themselves up, creating like new abilities for their fantasy character. That they had so much fun that they were kind of sad to return to their actual characters in the campaign. And it was just a really fun way to like spice up the gameplay, give them a chance to play something a little different, give them a chance to encounter something of a different issue from just investigation oriented stuff. And it was a blast. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to make adventures of a different genre than the main campaign. For example, investigative campaign? Sure. Investigative? I'll just do that as a question mark. Investigative? Let them do an adventure of combat. Another example of a genre shift is, another example of like how to do this is, in my opinion, give the players a different character for the shifted adventure. So, thematic genre shifts. Like, for example, like all of this, of course, is based on your talk with your players. Like, if you're playing a super hardcore, serious, grimdark kind of campaign, it can sometimes be not appropriate to do like an entirely wacky genre shift. For Master Fail things, I think that is... I don't like that idea as a whole for a campaign. I think for an adventure, it can be a lot of fun. Is to give your medieval fantasy group, now they're shooting lasers for an adventure before they go back to being their normal fantasy group. I think that could be very enjoyable. Remember Tone is a roller coaster and requires highs to give weight and significance to the lows. Usually I run my campaigns, I have a lot of humor in my campaigns. Even my most serious campaign, I still do a lot of silly stuff because I think it's fun. But B, you have to remember, you can't just have non-stop of one specific tone for an entire campaign. Also, hello Shuniko, the IU simp. Welcome. Always happy to have a paying enthusiast up in here. I hope you're having a great night. Welcome to the stream. Like, even in a horror movie, the horror movie is not just non-stop horror. Like, there are periods of levity in it to kind of give you breaks in the tension so that you can be able to appreciate the impact of when the horror elements pop in. So having times where the players, especially after a very like heavy adventure, for instance, giving them a chance to play something really like fun and lighthearted and or silly can be a great palate cleanser and get them back into the mindset of the rest of the campaign. Yes, hello Okami, happy to have you. You're a certified cutie pie. By the way, Yuko is currently playing Postscriptum. If you want to stop by their stream as well. Vaughn, can you please do a shout out for Graph Yukiko? Just so I know Okami wanted to check them out again. So, my favorite little wolf. But yeah, so I think that's an important thing to remember is the tonal roller coasters. Like even in a serious adventure, be sure to give your players an opportunity to have like fun stuff happen to them. Have something silly happen. Let them like get a chance to smile and have some joy, because it'll make it that much more impactful when you switch back to having something darker happening in the background. Now, another example of a genre shift adventure that I did was in my Eberron campaign. After the players were involved in this big, like, fighting for their life terrorist attack response adventure, they got an opportunity to start collecting their allies to fight the big bad guy. And so one of the groups of allies that they were befriending is the Fae, who I love the Fae. I've done lots of talks about why I love the Fae. But, so they loved the Fae, and so they were trying to call in their IOU from the Fae, and the Fae decided to fuck with them. And I used this also as a chance to do a genre shift for them to have fun. So instead of it being like an adventure where they fought stuff and they were playing their characters, I took away all their characters. I gave them a gender-bent version of their character, and the Fae made them play in a dating sim, like a Japanese dating simulator style game, in which they were a part of a fantasy kingdom, and they were each members of it, and the NPC companions of the party were each made into different love interests that the party had to convince to come to this dance with them by I guess the evening of the night. And so they had to use their knowledge of their NPCs and their personalities and everything to basically convince their NPCs, who did not know who the players were based on Fae trickery, to come with them on a date. And I got to use like all the stereotypes. Like one of them was a kudere, one of them was a bakadere, one of them was she was a himadire, then the other one was a tsundere. And so they had to do all of that, and the catch was that the Fae were like, yeah, if you fail to get any of these people to come with you on the date, they die. We'll take their souls. And so the players had a compelling reason to try and convince them. So it was a lot of fun. They got to play gender-bent versions of their characters. They got to be different people in this like ridiculous fantasy dating sim world. They got to see their NPCs in a different light, and it brought them closer to their NPCs because they actually got to work on the knowledge and experiences they had accumulated from interacting with these NPCs over the span of, months of real lifetime of different D&D gaming sessions, as well as in-game. I think it's been almost like months since they started the campaign. And it was a lot of fun. Chainsaw, your soul is mine! So yeah, that's an example of like why I think genre shifts can be fun, but use them sparingly, use them in isolation. I really feel like, depending on the length of the campaign, one significant genre shift adventure is probably enough. I also like genre shifts for interludes. It also works for interludes. I'm on the wrong screen. I'd love to see it. Also works for interludes. So, for example, like, I always like to give break periods between the characters' adventures. Like, they'll be doing plot adventures, and then I'll do, like, an interlude time where the players can basically do just RPing stuff that's important to their character, for instance, or with each other, or with the NPCs. As well as I come up with things that give them just, like, put them in an entirely different situation that isn't based around combat or anything. It's just, like, them having to deal with a new scenario. Also, thank you for the follow, Shineku. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed your Astolfo. So, for example, in my Eberron campaign, I had an interlude adventure that was literally the beach episode. They got together with a bunch of NPCs and they went to the beach. And they did all of the things that I watched in an anime rom-com beach episode. They made sandcastles, they had a barbecue, they played like hide and seek and stuff. I didn't do the test of courage, but I just had them do a beach episode. And they had a lot of fun. And it was just like something different. It gave them a new location, a new way to interact with each other and with the NPCs. It also involved, by the end of it, the ditzy harpy bard getting really high on mushrooms and psychedelics with the half-orc barbarian causing mischief during the party. I also had a Halloween episode of the campaign, which was literally like them getting put into a Fae Halloween issue, and it was them basically telling their backstories to this Fae entity. And it gave a chance for the players to actually like go into more detail about their backstories, and also give all of the players an opportunity, or players' characters, an opportunity to hear each of their different backstories, because they might not have been fully aware of what everyone's kind of baggage they were bringing to the table. So that's why I feel like interludes and genre shifts can be really productive to creating a really fun and fulfilling game experience. And it also lets you put more weight for when you jump back to the actual the mainstay of the campaign. All right, anybody have any questions about genre shifts before I talk about some homebrew stuff for the night? Okay. And without further ado, I will talk about homebrew. Not going to start a new one for this, I'm just going to type here. Hey, Peculiar Little Rabbit, welcome, welcome. Can we please have a shout out for B, my favorite Jackalope VTuber, who has done so much amazing fan art of all the VTubers I know. Because I do all the redeems for her, because I accumulate so many points. I hope you appreciate me, that I never try to do the fan art of me. I always try to do it for other people. I just like being a part of it when possible. Obsidia's homebrew campaign ideas. So I've been talking about this steampunk, arcanopunk kind of setting for a while now. I have 2 whole streams dedicated to it that you can watch on my YouTube. Oh yeah, how was Delver? It looked like Minecraft when I was watching you. It was very similar to Minecraft, I guess. Oh god, I got hit. Okay. So the 2 things I've worked on, surprisingly, no, not dungeons, but I have worked on dragons. Dragons in the modern world. And 2, Fate Heroic Spirits in D&D. Oh, it pretty much is Minecraft. It's just adventuring Minecraft. So I had a big like epiphany kind of thing where I was figuring out Because I like dragons, obviously. Dragons are cool. Everyone likes dragons. Literally 50% of Dungeons and Dragons. So I have my whole thing. I don't like people killing intelligent life unless it's an asshole. So in my particular homebrew setting, this involves a world which is essentially like a planar nexus point between the different planes of reality. I literally have decided to name the planet Nexus. And so all the people who live in the planet are from other planes that have since settled there. And now the barriers between the planes are too thick for essentially them to go home at this point. And so the can loot Astolfo even when DMing. Goddamn right I will. So the first, I guess, people who resided in my world were dragons from across the plains that settled there with the draconic like sub-races like lizard folk and kobolds. And they had these big draconic empires that millennia before the start of the campaign had already collapsed. Like they were long since parts of history. And so the dragons that are left in the world are very much on the decline, and are kind of a bit like they're kind of aimless relics of a bygone era that don't really have any true sense of community. So 200 years before the start of the campaign, a significant portion of the main nations of the world basically went through the Industrial Revolution. And so this means that the technology of people has advanced considerably. Now, dragons, as they are, divide up the world amongst themselves by their own territories and domains. And these don't necessarily correspond to national borders. And in previous eras, they could basically impose their will on given territorial areas by, being kind of dicks. By, like extorting people for tribute and like burning towns and countrysides and stuff. And so many dragons continue to do this. However, once there is a strong amount of magic in the world as well. And so as societies became more organized and unified, dragon slayers also came to existence. And having played in a dragon slaying campaign before, I can assure you, a properly equipped group of players can easily kill ancient dragons at significantly below their CR level. Like, we were, I think, level 13. We were 4 level 13 characters, and we killed an ancient red dragon pretty easily. We were just, it's all about design and how much money you have in gear. So dragon slaying became an activity for all the dragons who got particularly uppity. And then in the modernized world, dragons became confronted with the fact of even earlier dragon slayers could somewhat be dealt with, but when you've got nations with potentially millions of soldiers armed with guns and airships and massive magical like energy weapons and cannons and stuff, that it wasn't practical to try and go toe-to-toe with the modern nation states. And so they were confronted with kind of a conundrum of like, what do we do in this new and very, very dangerous world? And so dragons basically were divided into 3 camps. One was dragons decided, fuck it. Dragons left their home territories and found less developed lands to settle in. So they basically left the industrialized nations as a whole and moved to the less industrialized portions of the world, which of course were already marked by other dragons. And so that would start territorial disputes. Because if there's one thing dragons love to do, it's become arbitrarily territorial. And so that was one option, which was not terribly advisable to a lot of dragons. number 2, which was become citizens. So the modernized world, you basically have, I call them mortal rights because I don't like using the term human rights because I don't deal with racism in my setting really. So it's like everybody is mortal and therefore these are the kind of universalities, whether you're an elf, a human, a dragonborn, etc. While dragons existed outside of the system, they were not given mortal rights, and so they could be hunted and killed by governments and adventurers and stuff. And so what the governments did decide to do was it's better to have dragons be registered within their borders and held accountable and monitored than to basically have unregistered nuclear weapons throughout your country that could pop at any moment. And so many dragons, the vast majority of the dragons that remained in the industrialized countries, basically became citizens of the country. So, you'd have your random dragon, that is, they have just as much citizenship as any human or elf, and they've given the full protection of the rights they're in. Of course, dragons are very powerful in their own right, and so they basically, as a whole, most modern dragons that exist in the industrialized world don't assume dragon form ever. They just live in their polymorphed humanoid form. And they work, doing things like they run companies, organizations, work in government, etc. And they're basically just very powerful but fairly ordinary members of society. And this is actually surprisingly brought dragons together more as a community than they've done in centuries, because now they're kind of forced to have to interact with other people and with each other. So they have their children getting involved in academies and stuff. They become invested in the relations and inner workings of given region. The problem is they still mark their territory. So dragons still mark their domain, even if they're the citizen of a given nation. So, for example, you have a dragon in France, and this dragon historically lived in northern France, where part of its territory was Belgium. Part of its territory was in Belgium, part of it was in France. They ultimately decided to become a citizen of France, but in the dragon's mind, they still own that part of Belgium as their territory. Now, there's another dragon who lives in Belgium who also views that area as a part of his territory because, that was, now that he is a Belgian citizen. So, dragons will routinely engage in confrontations with each other for these invisible borders that exist across the world. And it's one of those things that only matters to dragons, and it's only really known about by dragons. And as long as it doesn't become known that this is a conflict being fought by dragons for dragon stuff as opposed to for national interests or for private interests, most nations are pretty okay with it. But so dragons will routinely engage in espionage, corporate, subterfuge, trade wars, etc., with organizations run by other dragons, with governments run by other dragons and stuff, basically as the way of them flexing against each other for control over their made-up domains. So that was one of the things about dragons in modern society as a whole. And Shineko, I'm talking about it kind of. These are homebrew stuff that I've been working on for a campaign that I've been writing. So this is all world building for stuff. And then number 3 is stay in the nation, but stay in the shadows. Some dragons didn't want to leave their territory. Some dragons didn't want to become citizens, though, and so they decided to stay in their territory, but are outside of the system. Now, this is a very dangerous life for a dragon, because while dragons are very powerful, having a nation of millions of people with its own intelligence and counterintelligence agencies available, actively hunting for things like dragons, can make it very dangerous. Like if you have the FBI and the NSA monitoring the United States for for unregistered dragons, yeah, that's potentially dangerous for a dragon. You have this thing though. It's like if you get caught, you're as somebody who's outside the system, you don't have any of the rights and privileges of a normal citizen of the nation or mortal rights. So they'll hunt you down, they'll kill you, they'll waterboard you, basically. So, but yes, mob boss dragons is a thing. So that's how I described how dragons work in the modern world. And I thought that was kind of neat. A lot of it is loosely based on Shadowrun, for like having dragons in charge of mega corporations, as well as the dragon who won president of the United States. Dunkelzane for president, never forget. He was assassinated on his inauguration. Next is something that is, of course, near and dear to my heart. Because if you know one thing about Obsidia, she loves Fate. So I wanted to figure out a way to make heroic spirits / servants from Fate in my D&D setting. And I figured out a way to do it. So, to do a real big synopsis about how the afterlife works in my campaign is basically all souls go to the Shadowfell where the Raven Queen prepares the soul to then go to the Goddess of Death, where she sends them to the afterlife. To whatever afterlife they end up choosing. So the Raven Queen at her core, hello Schmendrick, welcome. The Raven Queen at her core is a crow. She likes collecting shiny things. And so she's real resentful about the fact that she has to give these souls to the Goddess of Death, but it's kind of the contract that they're working off of. So the Raven Queen's compromise to this is that when she is preparing a soul to make it to the Goddess of Death, she takes just the tiniest little part of your essence. So she'll just kind of skim off the top a little bit of your soul essence and personality. Usually tied, skimmed essence, usually tied to things most closely associated to you. Most closely associated to you, or powerful aspects of you. And the reason for this is the things that are most iconic about you as a person, and the things you're most commonly associated with, the most powerful portions of your being, are the things where you notice the small bits that have been taken away the least. That's kind of her philosophy. So she'll skim a very small part of your soul before transferring it over for whatever's going to happen to it, and she keeps that for future reference. And so these are these retained portions of essence are basically a caricature version of yourself. So for example, if you were a powerful wizard in life, you were this powerful wizard who was an evocation specialist. So you're very famous for chucking fireballs, shooting lightning bolts. You also knew other spells, like you knew divination, you knew transmutation, conjuration, etc. However, you were most well known as this famous evoker wizard. The aspect of you that she would take could only use evocation spell, because that is what you're most strongly tied towards. And then the essence can be manifested as an echo, which is a heroic spirit, i.e., heroic spirit. So these aspects of your essence can be manifested in the real world as an echo, and most of the time The reason why an echo comes into existence is because the Raven Queen has bestowed an echo upon one of her servants to further their goals in coinciding with her own objectives, or it is possible for a powerful enough mage to essentially do a B&E job to the Tower of Memory of the Raven Queen and steal an echo, at least temporarily. This is highly frowned upon by the Raven Queen if she finds out about it, but while she is incredibly possessive, she unfortunately cannot be everywhere at once, so she doesn't necessarily know where all of the echoes are, because she just can't monitor the millions upon millions of echoes that she has accumulated over the millennia. So what does this mean? This means you can bring in a heroic spirit into your campaign. Prior adventurers, prior characters of your players, they can manifest as an echo, and hijinks can ensue. And I thought that was a really cool idea, because I like the idea of, especially for a follow-on campaign, having your players meet their previous characters in an echo. So in the most like exaggerated form of what they used to be. So those were two big homebrew ideas that I came up with recently that I'm very proud of. I also have a third one that I'm going to talk about right now, which is what am I thinking here? Which is everyone can make a deal in death. So, what does everyone can make a deal in death mean? It is it's a homebrew rule I'm playing around with for my upcoming campaign, because extra planar forces are so powerful and important in this campaign setting, and I like the idea that if you really like your character and they happen to die, that you can still have a chance to play them. And the way that that manifests is that when your character dies, you get given an offer a lot of the time by a warlock patron. And the warlock patron is basically, it's randomly determined, will give you a job offer. Yep, making a deal with Peng. The warlock patron will give you an offer to return you to life in exchange for you now being soulbound to that patron and their objective. And that patron may not have your best interest in mind, and they may not coincide, but they do want your soul, and they do want you to further things in the real world. So you have the option of, when you die, you can take a level of warlock that is tied to a given patron that I decide, and your character comes back to life. But now they are soulbound to that patron, and it comes with a lot of RPG baggage. Oh, maybe try seducing DM, seduce God. So I like that as an idea, to give you a chance of, like, you know, the party doesn't have to resurrect you necessarily, but you can still come back and play your character, if you like. And I just thought that would be a cool thing to add to the campaign, and it literally is basically creating adventure seeds for that character in the party by now making them work for one of these patrons who might be telling them to do things they're not terribly happy with. So yeah, that was another idea. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts about any of those things. I think they're pretty cool. So I continue ever more to write more for this homebrew campaign. I really hope to stream it one day. But we're still in the writing and playtesting part of it. All right. Unless anybody has any questions for tonight, we can probably end there. Managed to make it almost 3 hours. Really awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming out to my stream. I'm really happy you decided to sit through my 3 hours of storytelling 101. I hope you took notes. There will be a test. I fucked up my own thing. If you haven't done so already, please give me a follow here on Twitch. Give me a sub over on YouTube, where I post up the full VODs of all of my streams. as well as all of these D&D guides and storytelling 101 streams. Yeah, Vaughn, that was literally my inspiration. I think I even said that was literally my inspiration when I was talking about it. You can follow my YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter. You can join our Discord, the Eternal Citadel, and be a part of our amazing community. I love to have you guys. But yeah, thank you all for sitting through this. I hope you learned something. I hope there were some useful ways to approach a campaign, to approach storytelling that you think could be helpful going forward. Like, the best thing I could ever hear is if any of you happen to be writing a story and you tell me, hey, I used X, Y, and Z thing you talked about in one of your Storytelling 101 streams. I'd love to hear it. Be sure to let me know. Otherwise, I hope that you guys had fun tonight. I hope that I make your guys' nights nearly as awesome as you make mine by getting to share this with you. You're all beautiful, amazing, and valid people. I'm so happy you can come to my stream, be comfy, be yourselves, and be loved. Because you're all amazing and valid to me. Never forget, the world is better having you in it. All right, we are theoretically going to be playing D&D tomorrow on Alistair Forgall's channel at 9 p.m. Eastern. If you want to go see me playing an emotionally damaged lesbian Oni Tsundere, 7 feet of raw sexual power. But I'll let you guys know tomorrow when I have a better idea if that's happening or not, because we have historically very flaky incidents happening with it. But otherwise, we'll be back here next week. I'm probably going to be doing Darkest Dungeon on Monday. I hope you're all excited for that. And yeah, I think we're going to go raid somebody who is also playing D&D and is somebody who is including some of my favorite people. Leetro the Bronze, as he came in earlier, is doing his first session of his D&D VTuber campaign called Mistwalkers. So if you're a follower, please copy down the call to hugs. If you're a sub, please copy down the knights. Some of the people in the campaign are people or streamers I really like. There's Sif, who's my favorite knight dad. There is Yulia, my favorite little elf princess, who's so beautiful and so sweet. And there's Aster, everybody's favorite archmage wizard, super villain. I mean, I guess fantasy villain. So they're playing their first game. They're probably a couple hours into it right now. Yeah, they're about almost 2 hours into it. So let's go send them some Death Knight love. And with that being said, all have an amazing night. I appreciate you all so very much. And I hope you have the sweetest of dreams. Bye!